actually funds 50% security and policy enforcement that happens on campus and all of the infrastructure and so on, all their expenses. That's been set at that level, at that $1.4 million level for quite some time, and for now we would expect that to remain the same. The other area that we have is telecommunications costs, which is this one here. So what this covers is the cost that we pay to other telecommunication carriers. So we're very fortunate that California has a very strong, well-funded research and education networking backbone. That's scenic. And so all of the major universities in California and on the West Coast really connect into that, as do all of the school districts and so on and so forth. It's actually really, really good. It's really, really cost effective. Many other parts of the country are very, very jealous of us and what we have here in California in terms of our cost for networking. Internet access for us is basically free. It doesn't bother me how many things people watch on Netflix or YouTube or whatever. The cost is so little, it's not worth worrying about, which is an amazing place to be in. It really, really is. But what actually is impacting that cost is our connections off campus. So over time, campus has been expanding off campus, right? We have more and more buildings out around Berkeley. Now, some of the time, if you're really close, like along Oxford Street, we've done a lot of work actually trenching and putting campus fiber in the ground so we can run connections off of the campus network like you're on campus if you're on Oxford Street, for example. But as you get further afield into downtown Berkeley and so on, and you look at things like 4th Street and so on and so forth, right, those locations are further away. And there, for now, our option is really to buy a service from a telecommunications carrier. So the more of those we do, the more that cost increases. And right now, that cost is actually increasing. Real estate services continues to choose to go into buildings outside off of campus, and that's a pressure on our costs, right? We don't get any extra funding when that happens. We just get told, hey, there's a bunch of people moving into this location, go make it work. And we go make it work. And that ends up being a hit on our budget and a service that we have to continue to provide that's a recurring cost from then on. So that's one area where we have little control, but that cost is increasing without our control on it, right? So then we have inventorial equipment depreciation. So what this is for a recharge area, so what we do is when we buy a large piece of equipment that's over $5,000 in cost, of which the network is full of about $7 million of that, and those typically are things that are in the core of the network, on the border of the network, the data center, places like that, not at the edge, the access switching, the access points are cheap and so on and so forth. They don't fall into this category. But this is the core part of all the routers and firewalls and things like that that make the heart of the network work. So the good thing about this is actually really a savings account, right? As we depreciate it, we actually take 20% of the cost of that thing, and as we buy it, we depreciate it over 5 years. So every year, 20% that we spent also goes into this depreciation. It comes out of our operating budget, goes into our reserve fund, which means that we build up a savings account, which is nice because then when it comes to replace that stuff, we can go spend that money again. But when we spend that money, that 20% counter starts again, right? So then we start getting the charge of 20% on whatever we just spent. So traditionally what we were doing is we were actually buying very large chassis-sized switches and putting them out at the access layer and basically running them like a Linksys at your home. It wasn't a very cost-effective method, but it did mean that most of those purchases came out of this reserve section, which meant that more money had to be moved out of operating budget into reserves each year, so that cost was increasing. So what we've actually done is we've changed that. So we no longer, at the edge of the network for the access switching, buy large chassis switches. We actually purchase smaller switches that are able to be clustered together, but each individual switch actually is a fairly small purchase. So that's stuff that just comes out of our operating budget when we need to buy them. And that is allowing us to reduce the cost here for inventorial equipment. Our plan is right now, as I said, it's about $7 million. That's about $1.4 million a year that we're paying. This is our 2016 budget, and we're starting to constrain that now. It'll come down to about $1 million a year that goes into that. So that's $5 million that we'll keep in a piggy bank for replacing core network equipment. The other area that's affected by that actually fairly directly is vendor maintenance contracts. And you'll see they're both about the same size. We actually spend about 15 to 20% of the cost of equipment on maintenance, right? So those two percentages are quite close together. And again, the other thing that we're doing there is when you buy large chassis switches, you have to buy a service contract for them because otherwise you won't get software updates, you won't get parts replaced if something breaks, and something breaks all the time on this network, trust me. So by moving towards smaller switches, most of the vendors in that space actually provide a limited lifetime warranty where, hey, if it breaks, just ship it back to us and we'll send you a new one. We keep a stock of spares ourselves. We don't actually have to pay for any support costs. So we're actually managing to reduce that cost as well, and we expect to reduce that dramatically over the coming couple of years, which is really good because that's money that we have more flexibility to do things with. Over here, there's these two little pieces of the pie that are actually really, really important. Each one of them by itself is 1.5 to 2% of our budget. So a total of 3 to 4% of the entire networking budget. This is the funds that we use to buy access switches that go out in the field. So if you have a wired network connection anywhere on campus, this is the money that bought the stuff that plugs into. If you use any Wi-Fi service, this is where we bought the access points from to provide that service. So you notice that's a really, really small part of the puzzle. The other thing that's not so great about it is it's the part of the puzzle that we have a lot of decision power over. We can decide to spend or not spend that money. What that means is when our budget is constrained, the first thing that stops happening is we stop buying new switches, we stop buying new access points, and the quality of the entire access network for campus starts to degrade. And that was a situation we were in for a very long time in many areas. When it was a recharge service in the traditional sense where you paid per month for service, the departments that could pay, they had great networks because they would pay. The departments that couldn't pay had really poor networking, and we're still working our way across campus fixing a lot of that now. And a lot of that 2 to 4% we spend is going into places where there's still shared 10 meg hubs. We pulled out some coax out of a building just like last month or the month before that. The backbone of the building was 2 meg coax with a bunch of 10 meg hubs off of it. So, hey, it was environmental sciences. Nobody really cares. so those are the sorts of challenges we have in terms of funding and where our money goes, because it's a lot of money. So, okay, now I'll move on to the actual technical stuff. So a really big project, and this one has actually taken us a couple of years from the planning to completing the execution, was what we call distribution collapse. And I'll have a slide that will show us that the data center network as it sits today in a bit that will make this clearer. What we used to have, so around campus, there are 7 to 8 distribution zones. That's where all the routing for all of your subnets on campus and where the firewall and service lives and so on and so forth. What we used to have is we had a switch sitting there that all the switches out in the buildings connected into and a router. And then for each subnet, we would plug in a cable between the switch to the router. Every time we implemented a subnet, we would plug in a new cable. That was a 1 gig connection. What that meant was every subnet on campus was limited to 1 gigabit per second. Didn't matter how many 1 gig connections you had, didn't matter what the size of the pipe going to your building was, your subnet could only ever reach the rest of the campus and the rest of the world at 1 gigabit per second. Furthermore, every time somebody said, hey, I have 50 connections over here, I need a new subnet, we had to roll somebody out in a truck to plug in a cable. In some cases, that means hit a button, wait for the air exchanger to exchange the air in the pit, climb down the hole, plug in a cable, climb back out of the hole, close the hole, blah, 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 blah. Not a great business model, right? So what we did was we combined the switching and the routing into one piece of equipment. So that, first of all, reduces our maintenance costs for equipment, it reduces our replacement costs for equipment, it improves our flexibility in terms of how we configure subnets. We've gone from having a 10-day lead time to create a new subnet to, on the network engineering side of actually doing it, it's 2 business days, right? It's like, oh, we need a subnet, okay, boom, 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 subnet, done, move on. The other good thing about that was we took the opportunity while we were doing that to upgrade all the connections from those router zones back to the core of the campus network from 1 gig connections to 10 gig connections. So that's where that line there of increasing aggregate switching capacity of the network. So if you added up all the major links on going to the core of the network, they used to provide about 56 gigabits of throughput. Now it's 560 gigabits, roughly. It's a meaningless number because there's no one place where you could transfer that, but you can definitely transfer at a higher rate, and there's more capacity in the core of the network. So we're really pleased that we got that done. It simplified things a lot for us. It set the stage for a lot of other things that we want to do in the future. The other thing that we've done is a bunch of work on Wi-Fi. This has been an ongoing thing. So we're in this point in data networking right now where Wi-Fi is maturing as a technology, and devices are becoming much less tethered, right? Everybody has their iPads and their MacBook Airs and whatever, right, that maybe have one USB-C port on them. So Wi-Fi is becoming more and more important for us. And so previous to this, we did spend a lot of time expanding Wi-Fi capacity on campus. We actually continue to chunk through that, right? That's going to be a never-ending job. As we have funding in that, again, that 1.5 to 2% for Wi-Fi, we'll be constantly spending money hoping to keep the quality of the network up, right, and expanding coverage and improving coverage in areas. So definitely, if you have areas where you're like, wow, Wi-Fi is really bad in this area, let us know about it, open a ticket, we'll come out, take a look. We've modified, we used to have rules about where we would and wouldn't place access points. We avoided offices and things like that. The problem with that is you have a bunch of access points all down the hallway trying to reach offices, and they all talk to each other, and they all tell each other to turn down their power because they can see each other, then it doesn't penetrate into the office. So we've moved away from that into moving and putting access points actually in people's offices and so on, where necessary to improve coverage. So we're doing those sort of things on campus. But the other thing that we did was we did two big new Wi-Fi services. So one of them was EduRoam. So what EduRoam is a global Wi-Fi roaming service for education. It's very popular in Europe, Latin America. It has pretty decent penetration now in the US as well. What this means is if you're set up for EduRoam, which on campus means you're on the same network as Everest 2. You can use EduRoam on campus all day, every day, no problems. In fact, we would recommend it. If you're somebody particularly who travels occasionally, set up EduRoam, remove Everest 2. They're the same thing, just use EduRoam. And then if you go to any other institution anywhere in the world where EduRoam is, you just open your device up or whatever, and you should be on the network. So that is a convenience thing both for the campus community who travel and for people who come here to campus. I heard from a lot of departments who are really pleased with having that available. The other one that we did was an open visitor network, CalVisitor. This one is really popular. Last time I checked, there's about 6,500 people on CalVisitor at any one time. Right now, there'd be about 6,500 people using CalVisitor. Some of that is because they can't be bothered setting up their Everest 2 key and getting on Everest 2. Yeah, that'll happen. The idea there was to make things much simpler for departments, for people who are having events and so on. You don't have to go and generate a bunch of Everest guest passes, print them out, hand them around, and so on and so forth, right? So far, from what we can tell, that's been a really huge success. Part of that also was something that we'll get onto later, which we'll talk about some more. The other thing that we've done is a lot of work around science and research support. So we actually, working with EECS and some help from the lab and ESNet, applied for a grant from the National Science Foundation, and we're actually successful in that. So we got about $500,000 to build out what's called the Science DMZ infrastructure and do some work on software-defined networking and how it can help with large data flows for science. Scott Schenker, who's one of the co-founders of the OpenFlow technology that you may have heard about if you hear anything about data networking, actually was one of the co-PIs on that out of EECS. So what that allowed us to do is actually, we're still finally completing this. We're waiting for our 100 gigabit per second connection. But we actually have what's called a Science DMZ now, which is a part of the network that's set aside only for doing big data science transfers. And it has things called data transfer nodes on it, which are run by software that's specifically tuned for doing really large transfers. So this isn't like watching a streaming movie. This is like, hey, I have 3 terabytes of data down in San Diego, and I need it here so I can work on it. Let me suck that up here. So that's the sort of thing that we're doing. That's actually connected into the new HPC cluster that Research IT has been putting together. It has a name now, and I forget what it is off the top of my head. So we actually have a data transfer node that's connected to that. So if somebody has a job that they want to run on that cluster, they can suck the data from anywhere, hopefully that has a similar infrastructure and connection to Internet 2, for example. They can suck that data here to campus pretty efficiently and get it into their science pipeline on the cluster and process it. So that's what we've been doing there. We have some other things that we'll be working on further to enhance that. Like I said, we're just putting the finishing touches on having a 100 gigabit connection. There's some work being done on with several UC institutions across California, led out of UCSD, to build what's called the Pacific Research Platform, which is actually going to interconnect several institutions. And for that, we actually have a device on campus that does 40 gigabit per second. Disk-to-disk transfer is the idea. So it's flash I/O, high speed. So basically, you should be able to get 40 gigabits per second from here to there, which will be nice if it works. We've been helping out around the edges with enabling the use of cloud services on campus, particularly at Amazon. This isn't really core to what the networking department does, but we've done some things that are helpful. We've been helping out with account support, and some of you may have seen me give talks about that and about using Thereby to get your Amazon account under the enterprise agreement that Amazon has with UC. We actually have a simple ticket queue that we're running that comes to the same place that Hostmaster tickets go to and get handled by the same person. So to help people just with any accounting issues with Amazon. And the other thing that we have is we did put in something that is core networking, is we put in a 10 gig link from campus directly into Amazon's Oregon region, which means if you run services on Amazon in Oregon, you can actually give them, for example, campus RFC 1918 routing address space and make them look like they're actually on campus, which is useful for some people. So those are the things that we've recently gotten completed. Things that we are about to start working on or are underway. The data center network update. So I've been talking about this an awful lot. I held 3 sessions back in January to let people know what's coming. There's another session, April 7th here, to talk about what will be happening on our final migration day. Some of you are very involved in early migrations as well. Basically, what we did is we undertook a complete redesign of the data center network, which was aging and had some really significant architectural issues. And I'll go through those in just a second. So our plan is to basically move everything over onto the new data center network architecture. The other thing that's helping us with is we're basically handing over the side of the data center network. So right now, if you went into the data center, there's this page, really messy, and has a bunch of switches in it and cables connecting to those switches. Well, that's basically whenever you ask for a connection in the data center, one of our guys runs out to the data center, plugs in a cable. So remember that story I was telling you about the rest of campus? Yeah, except for every single connection, right? We go do that in the data center, which makes it really slow to get services in the data center. Basically, we decided, you know what? One IT and all that, we're handing all this over to the data center operations team. And Steve Geary and Debbie Meach have been very helpful in working with us on this. And so what is actually happening is they'll run all the physical side of it. So they'll run all the cables, they'll plug everything in. If we need an extra switch, they'll install it. If we need a switch replaced, they'll replace it. And all we'll do is run some scripts to configure things, which will actually improve our turnaround on fulfilling service requests in the data center dramatically in the next few months. So this is our current data center network architecture. And you can see here, this is that bit that I talked about before for the campus distribution collapse project. So this is what we used to have. We had a switch, and then per subnet, we had a connection to the router. The data center still looks like that today. So what that means is in the data center, again, it doesn't matter how many servers you have connected at 1 gigabit per second, all of those servers share 1 gig to the rest of the network and to the outside world and to each other sometimes. If you're going from an application server to a database server, you can have 30 application servers, 1 big database over here, and you really only have 1 gigabit per second throughput between those two. So that's very constraining. It also meant that people would say, hey, we want 10 gig in the data center. I'd be like, that's nice. I can give you a 10 gig port, but, you know, very limited use, right? If it wants to talk right next door to this other thing on 10 gig, that's fine. but for doing anything else, it was really useless. So we really had to replace this architecture before we could really offer 10 gig in the data center, which has been a big task. So we came up with a design. We went out to RFP. Arista Networks was the winner of the RFP, and we're pretty happy with their product so far. So this is what we're moving towards. So what we'll actually have is we have 2 switches that are the core of the network, and it's quite interesting because we have that whole cage right now, and everything that we're doing in that cage, or a large chunk of what we're doing in that cage, collapses down to like one rack with 2 switches sitting in it and a bunch of fiber coming in, which is just fantastic. It's a similar thing to what we've seen with virtualization on hardware, right, where it's gone from racks and racks of servers to, oh, look, there's this chassis, right, and it's running like 300 machines. And then out throughout the data center, we'll have a bunch of what we call leaf switches. So these are either 1 gig access switches or 10 gig access switches that are just spread throughout the data center wherever it makes sense, wherever there's the most connectivity needs. So we have all of that in place now. The data center operations team is still racking some of the switches. All of the fiber that connects from those back is in. Spine is up and running. Actually, last week, we moved all of our equipment onto the new data center network. So we're actually the first users, and it's up and live and carrying production traffic right now. And then starting April 1st, we're going to start doing early migrations for folks who got in touch with us and said, hey, we want to migrate early onto the new network. And so throughout April, we'll be doing that. At the end of April, we'll basically stop making any changes in the data center so we can make sure we know where everything is. And then on May 17th, Sunday, the day after commencement, everything that is left on the old data center network, we will turn off all the networking for. We will reconnect it to the new network, turn on all the networking, and everything should be fine. Fingers crossed. So there's a lot of planning that's going on. As a matter of fact, I'm going to run off right after this to yet another meeting about this. We've been spending a lot of time planning this work. We know that this day particularly will cause significant disruption for everybody. We're going to be releasing more details of our plans for that day. As I said, April 7th, there's a session here to discuss the plans for that day and what that day is going to look like. Right now, we have a notice up on system status that says it'll be from like 6 a.m. in the morning to 6 p.m. at night. We certainly hope that it won't be that long. We don't expect at any rate that we would have the network down that long. That's going to allow time for people to shut down things that they want to turn off before we unplug them from the network. And then for us to move the network, and then for people to turn things back on, contact us, and we'll do any troubleshooting that's necessary to make everything is fine and close everything off before we all go home. So that's the plan for May 17th, and you'll be hearing lots more about that. The other plan that we have, thanks to Erica Donald in Information Security and Policy, we're ENSing Air Bears. I'm not sure, Gary, I don't think you've seen this yet, have you? No. So Erica Donald in Information Security and Policy put this together for us, this diagram. So yeah, this is what we're doing with Air Bears. So we are phasing out Air Bears. We're replacing obviously with Air Bears 2 and Edge Your Own and Cal Visitor. So right now, one thing that Air Bears is still used for is guest accounts. In some cases, we'll have a solution for that, which will use CalNet guest accounts. So again, this is something you'll be hearing more about. We're not just going to one day flick a switch and it'll be gone. Though every time Air Bears breaks, we kind of think, but no, we turn it back on every time. There's still about 6,500 users using this on a daily basis at any one time. So right now, again, there'd be 6,500 people on Air Bears instead of Air Bears 2. We are going to work on pushing those people off of that. We'll be changing the captive portals, for example, when you log into Air Bears to say, hey, this is going away. When it does go away, we'll still have a page up, so Air Bears will still be there. You'll connect to Air Bears. We'll say, hey, this has gone away. Go here to connect to Air Bears 2. So we'll smooth the transition. We were talking about having this done by the end of this semester with everything else we have going on with the data center and so on. We're pretty flexible about that. As you guys know, nobody here really cares when you turn something off. It can last for years. We'll plan it so we let everybody know, and we're working with CSSIT and so on to make sure and the folks in the res halls to make sure that we smooth that transition as much as possible. One of the nice things about that is the residence halls are working with us on this. and they're going to be phasing out their local ResConf Wi-Fi service as well at the same time. So basically, students who are in the residences will now have a consistent Wi-Fi service across campus and residences. They'll all be using Everest 2, which will be nice for them. It'll simplify things for them a lot. The other project that we're just about to go out to RFP for, as a matter of fact, I think the RFP is going out today, is a new load balancer service. If you haven't worked with the load balancers, you're probably going, huh? So to explain how important this is, if you log in on CAS, get email, go to anything on Web Farm, and probably a dozen other things that you do every single day, your traffic passes through a load balancer. This service is incredibly important and incredibly neglected. We actually picked it up as an orphan service that was run by another group that was shut down, and then where do we put it? Networking, okay, fine. So we got it. We've really done nothing with it since we got it. We replaced the hardware because the hardware was 5 years past end of life. We did that a couple of years ago with hardware that is now me. So what we're doing is completely redesigning that service. We have met with folks. We've talked to people about what their requirements are. If you weren't involved in that and would like to have been, it's probably too late, but we probably heard from somebody who has a similar problem to you. So, and what we'll put in place will be something that's fairly flexible anyways. So we're hoping to completely revamp that service with something that's much more scalable, more flexible. We're looking to move. So load balancers are interesting because a load balancer, because it sees all the traffic in an application layer, can do a lot of really cool things if you understand your application. But if the networking group is running it, well, we don't understand your application right. So what we're looking to do is really move toward a model where we can hand off actual configuration control to some parts of the load balancers, similar to what we do with the firewall service, where we had say, hey, here's your firewall, go configure it. We'll do similar things with the load balancers for those who want it, where we'll say, hey, look, go configure your stuff in your load balancer, and you can turn off servers and turn on servers and handle that. The other thing that we'll be adding with this that is very nice is DNS-based load balancing, which basically means that you can make topological decisions, right? The load balancer service right now basically says, can look at servers in the data center here and say, are you up, and if not, route traffic around the failure of that server, right? What a DNS-based load balancing allows you to do is say, oh, look, data center over here, different IP addresses, are you up, are you up, are you up? And if one of them goes down, you can route traffic to the other data center, or you can have traffic shared live between data centers. This helps out for things like SDSC, where we have stuff right now that runs kind of warm standby. There are folks who would really like to run their stuff live if it's particularly critical, for example, Calnet and so on, right? Everybody knows that if you want a system that will take over when the primary system fails, the best choice is a system that's always running and carrying production traffic anyways, because it's already working. So that's what we'll be able to start providing, is that you'll be able to have things in multiple geographic sites and actually have them both running live or automatically switch between them. We are also working currently on replacing the DNS and IP address management system. So right now, when you ask for a host name, Kelsey opens about 4 or 5 windows and does all these things in each of them and blah, 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 blah. And eventually you get an email address that says, hey, don't forget to register your security contact. That's a really, really high-touch process for something that should be really, really simple. It also does not work at all for IPv6. And there are no more IPv4 addresses ever done. It's over, right? So we need to get everything IPv6 capable. Everything that the networking group has been doing for the past 3-4 years now, our aim has been to everything we build should be IPv6 capable fully. So the new data center network, for example, it has IPv6 management addresses. You can't actually manage. Our aim is that you will not manage anything in the data center on the networking side of things with IPv4 at all. We're replacing our existing system, which was a homegrown system written and put together before really many other people were doing this task in a large way at all. Now there's stuff you can buy off the shelf. And so we're replacing it with a system called Infoblox. One of the nice things about that and what we hope to do, initially we're just going to replace that system to make Kelsey's life easier. Then the next phase after that will be to start to use that system to actually provide more self-service options. So for people who understand DNS and want to control their own subnet, rather than we often have the thing of, hey, can you delegate the subnet to us? We're like, no, because our history of that has been really poor. We delegate subnets, departments change. lose track of a subnet, it comes back to us completely messed up. We have to clean up the mess. So we don't do that. Now we'll be able to actually provide this service to folks where they can manage things. They can set up host names and so on and so forth. That'll be coming after we actually do the cut. When we cut to the new system, for everybody else, it'll be pretty much transparent, except Kelsey will be a lot happier. The other thing that we're starting to talk about, and this is going to be something, this is something that the networking group can put the underlying technologies in place for, but it's going to involve collaboration with information security and policy, with endpoint engineering, with CSS desktop, and a bunch of folks. What we want to do is something that will allow us to simplify the security issues for network users. One of the parts of that is network virtualization. So similar to virtualization on hardware, where you take a piece of hardware and you cut it up into separate chunks where, hey, this is a server, but they're running on the same hardware. Network virtualization is similar. This is a network, that's a network, but they're separate, completely separate, but they're running on the same hardware. What that allows you to do, instead of having, right now, the campus networking policy is, it's all open. As soon as you plug in on a port, you're on the internet. And that isn't a great security posture for most people. Now you can go and get a departmental firewall service and configure the firewall and put the connections behind that firewall. That's the way we handle it a lot today. But there's some things that are broad across the campus, and if you span multiple campus, if you have a large department that spans multiple campus buildings and zones, then you have to have multiple firewall services at each one of those zones. For example, a really good example is our voice network. So our voice network out to the desk is traditional. You come off a PBX gateway that's in your building, comes out to a traditional phone. We're not doing voice over IP to the desktop, but the backhaul of that PBX network is all over data networking that's provided by my group. So all of that is spread all over campus, and it's all right now on its own separately built network infrastructure. And one of the reasons for that was the security of it. We didn't want it all exposed to the public internet. But maintaining a complete shadow network that we've built from scratch is not really efficient. So this is something where it would allow us on the same networking hardware as the rest of campus data networking happens to run that voice network over it. It would look like a completely separate network, but it would, to all intents and purposes, but it would use the same hardware, which is a much more efficient way of doing it. The other thing that would allow us to do is, instead of having firewalls that are spread all over campus, is centralize where our firewalls are. So you could have one point that all the traffic comes to for firewalling. Again, that allows us to get more economies of scale at that location. Put in just a couple of really big boxes instead of scattering. We have really uneven load across campus. We have one place where we have a firewall that could handle like 50, 60 firewall services that's handling 2. The costs for that aren't great, right? We'd much rather get better economies there. The other thing that we could potentially do is create a network that was a good enough security network, which is basically, hey, if you have a device and all you want to do is browse the web and do your typical administrative tasks and you don't need access to a bunch of weird stuff, that's like 80% of users, right? Why not just give them all the one security policy, put them there? You don't have to manage the specific firewall rules for those people. You just know, hey, that person is on that network, so they've got basic firewall enabled. So that's the sort of thing that we'd like to enable for campus, because that would definitely reduce the administrative overhead on a lot of IT folks on campus. And the other thing that we hear from CSS a lot of the time is, I don't know if this person is behind the firewall or not, because they'll have a connectivity issue. And sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't, sometimes they're behind 3 firewalls. It gets really confusing, right? So simplifying that whole infrastructure around security for campus is something that we'd like to do. As I said, the networking group can do the network virtualization, which is really the enabling technology for that. Then a lot of the rest of that discussion is between ourselves and the security and policy folks, other central IT organizations, and departmental IT organizations about what they'd like to do once we enable those sorts of features on the network. One nice thing about this is most of this is in software. It doesn't require us to spend any money to make this happen, though. The next big hardware project that we're going to do is the core of the network. So this is all those distribution zones that we talk about. The equipment that's in there now was last updated. Now it's about 4 or 5 years ago, so it's aging. It's equipment that doesn't scale very well for doing 10 gig connectivity. So all the connections off of that equipment are 10 gig up to the core of the network, but out to buildings we tend to run 2 or 4 gigabits per second out to a building. we'd really like to enable being able to do 10 gig or multiples of 10 gig out to buildings, particularly where we have researchers and science work going on. So basically, we'll be replacing all of that hardware across the network. That's going to be a roughly $2 million project to do that, and will probably take 12 to 18 months to complete. So that'll be pretty big. It'll be something that, again, that one, like our distribution collapse, you guys won't see it. It'll happen, and we'll say, hey, we did it, and you guys will be like, which is the way all network changes should be. Everybody should go at the end of a network change, because you shouldn't have noticed anything. Other than that, I would really like to know what other things you guys think of when you think of data networking, in terms of things that, wow, this should just be so much easier than it is. Those are the things I really want to hear about. Or, yep.
It has been mentioned at some point about having a tool for managing multiple firewalls, but as far as I understand, it's not really available. So
we looked at providing a way to manage this. So we use Cisco firewalls for the campus firewall service. And we looked at a way of providing a centralized system that would provide access for people, so you could just manage your firewall context and they'd all be grouped together for your department. Cisco's management software doesn't really work well for that, but we have done with a few groups. Law was trying this out and a few others, where we'll cover the cost of the license for that management software for enough licenses to manage your contexts, and our data network recharge for the firewall service. As long as you can provide a Windows server that can run on, you could have your own copy of that software running, and you could manage multiple firewall contexts through that. So if you have more than like 2 or 3 contexts, then it starts to become reasonable to do something like that. So yeah, just feel free to drop me an email, iorr@berkeley.edu, yeah, and we can talk about that. Yep.
Are there any plans, or has anyone even discussed getting something like direct access up and running for clients, especially people on laptops and more like the Microsoft tablets?
So direct access is?
Basically behind the scenes firewall that runs for IPv6. 8.1 allowed it.
Okay, yeah, it's a Windows feature,
yeah, but basically it's VPN, you don't see, you don't touch, you don't have to worry about it. It's just, hey, I have to go here, get out the opens behind the scenes and access it.
So at some point in between all of these other things, we are going to look at the campus VPN solution, and some of that fits in with talking about that idea. So right now, the campus VPN solution as it exists really only exists for one reason, and that's to provide you an IP address that looks like you're on campus for the purposes of content licensing. It isn't intended to provide any sort of security at all, though there's a lot of departments on campus that put the VPN address range in their firewall rules, so hey, if you're on VPN, you can get in. What you're basically saying is, hey, about 70,000 of my closest friends can access this service. So what we would like to do is look at technologies like that would provide improved network access and allow us to, on a policy basis for departments, enable saying, hey, this person should be on this subnet, this person should be on that subnet based on who they are. What technologies underlying that we use to enable that is another question. There's a bunch of them that are available, and it would include something on the VPN side of things as well, because it would be nice, right, if you have a bunch of servers that are for your department's use only, that you could VPN in and have access to those servers in a much more controlled way than saying 70,000 people have access to them. So we do want to do those sorts of things. That comes after that network virtualization discussion and the discussions about how we provide departmental policies for networking in general. That's something better than that firewall service. So yeah, it's something that's definitely something that sort of thing is something we want to enable. It's going to take us a couple of years before we get to the point where the network can support it.
You mentioned you're going to bring at least 10 gigs to the buildings. Does that mean to the MPO? Or are you talking about actually dropping, so you're not going to drop 10 meg switches in the racks?
No, not today, but if you have somewhere where you really, really need it, come talk to us. We can custom build you anything you need. If it's for a science research project, Sometimes there may have to be a discussion about funding for it. We try to avoid those though, because we are funded pretty well. But yeah, come talk to us. If you have a specific need that you need 10 gig for, yeah, we'll talk to you and see what we can build. We've done it in Stanley Hall. We built a private network between scientific instruments and storage stuff to enable connectivity and so on. So
but for general networking, you guys aren't looking to swap switches to do that?
No, so at the access layer of the network, what we are doing is we're putting in switches. So within a building, we have what we call a root switch, which is a distribution switch of the building, and then all of the access switches in the building come back to that. And then off of that, we have a 2 to 4 gig link. So what we're looking at doing is right now, all the switches we're putting in place will support 10 gig uplinks. So basically, we can move to 10 gig links to the buildings, and within the backbone of the building, we can move to 10 gig without having to replace hardware. Replacing the access side of it so that we can do 10 gig out to users requires cabling that will support it, which in a lot of places on campus, we barely support 100 meg still, and we're working. It's something we'd like to fix dearly, and we're doing what we can. But our time frame to replace any access switch in the network is around about we're around about 7 to 8 years at the moment in terms of how many switches we have. So basically, we start at one end of the campus, we work our way through. 7 or 8 years later, we'll come back and replace that switch with something new. Sometimes it's longer. We do have stuff. I know we have active network connections on equipment that was installed in 1995. Yeah. Yep.
You mentioned regarding kind of a basic firewall service that you could allow for all over campus. What kind of time frame are you guys looking at employing that, and that would be department or person, like, individual?
So this is still very much something that's in the idea phase. That work that I talked about with network virtualization, for example, is something that's an enabling technology for that would have to happen first. I would think that it's still probably 2 years away before we'd actually have a fully fledged service. We might have something that's in pilot before that, but I think a 2-year time frame. So there's a couple of ways of doing it. One of them is to have something that can be controlled by the departments, but that kind of looks a lot like the departmental firewall service we have today, maybe just in a better way that's a little bit more manageable for users. The other one is really a very broad default set of rules that we would just apply across everybody. And if you wanted something separate that was different from that, then our answer would be, well, go get one of our custom firewall services. So that would be kind of how we're envisaging right now managing that. One of the things that I would really like to do, and we haven't really had many discussions about this yet other than at a very broad level, is the CalNet group has been doing a lot of work on Cal Access and Cal Groups. And what that should enable is actually a facility whereby you can have groups in LDAP that you also have people who control that group, right? So somebody else. So right now, for example, our firewall service today, if somebody new starts with your department, has to be managing your firewall instances. You send us an email and we say, oh yeah, we think we know who you are, and we enable that person access to your firewall context. That's really, really not great. We don't want that responsibility, right? But we have it right now because there's no other mechanism for it. So for an example there, what we would really love to have is groups that are in Grouper that are, hey, for this firewall context, this is the group of admins, and hand that group over to that department, and then they can add and remove people and manage that group. But then if we can extend that and bake the grouper functionality into services like VPN, even enable authentication on the wired ports on the network, or use grouper in Wi-Fi and have that control what subnets you end up on, we end up in a situation where you can come into here, open your laptop, and be on your department's subnet on Wi-Fi, for example, right? So those are the sorts of features that we would really like to start to provide, but it will take, that's a really long lot of things that have to happen to build all of the framework and infrastructure that provides that. But in terms of how I'm thinking about things, that's the direction that I want the network to move in. Yep.
I was wondering what technologies are we going to use for network virtualization? How are you going to go about that?
So the typical one that comes up immediately when people talk about network virtualization is MPLS, multi-protocol label switching, which is a technology that's been used in the service provider world for many years now. A lot of enterprises have VPN services where they're basically, all their sites look like they're on one network together, but they're on the same network as a bunch of other customers of AT&T or Verizon or whoever it is. And the technology that those carriers use is called MPLS. So that's one that's really well known, well understood for doing network virtualization. It's been around for many years. There are other ways of doing it. We really haven't had the technology discussion yet. We're really still at the point of, to be honest with you, right now we're at the point of, oh my goodness, data center. Pretty much all of the senior engineers and folks who would work on designing network virtualization and having these discussions about technology. Every time we meet, we talk more about the data center, which is good. We need to get that right, and we need to get that done. After that is when we'll start to have the discussions about how we do it. We've been wanting to get to it for a couple of years now. Actually, I think when I first started here, I did a Micronet shortly after I started here, and I said we wanted to do network virtualization. That was 4 years ago now. So it's been a long time coming. There was, again, a lot of groundwork. The distribution collapse we had to do to get the core and distribution layer of the network into the right place where it would reasonably support those sorts of technologies. Now that that's done, we can sort of move on and implement them.
As far as moving to IPv6, you had mentioned when you met with our group a couple months ago, just our local IT unit, that when we do move to IPv6 or to the next network thing, there was going to be a lot of self-service options available.
Yeah.
Just as a precursor to, I know you're going to get bombarded with this, are we going to be able to specify just like 1,000 IP subnet range we can grab?
Yeah, I mean, well, for IPv6, for example, everybody will get a /64, which is 2 to the 32 times the size of the entire internet. So
what if we don't need that much?
It doesn't matter. That's how IPv6 works. You still get a /64. One of the things we want to do very much, and I know that there's a lot of people. So typically, in the past, what we did was, oh, hey, here's a cable that connects you to the network. And here's your IP address that is assigned to that cable, which is actually a thing that does not exist. There is no cables have IP addresses. Though, you know, Thunderbolt and so on probably has enough smarts that you could probably start to give your cable an IP address. But really, the network cables that we use, they do not have IP addresses, right? They're put into a VLAN on a subnet and so on and so forth. This whole idea of tracking IP address on cables has created more problems for us than it's worth. With the new system, the very first thing that we'll be doing as we push out the new system is really we won't be giving out static IP addresses anymore. You can get fixed DHCP, and you can go and configure that address on your device if you want to rather than use DHCP, but we'll give you fixed DHCP, and we'll give you DHCP, and that will be it. So you will basically, that will be how we manage IP addresses.
But for the self-service side, we would be able to manage that part of it so we don't have to like, annoy Kelsey every couple.
Yeah, we will want to do things like, we want to use things like SPAs for doing static DHCP. There's also some stuff that's happening with information security and policy around how they handle ownership of MAC addresses, that whole MAC registration portal and so on and so forth. We want to move to something that's better and more useful as well. And the other thing is that people like Desktop are talking, and endpoint engineering are talking to us about, you know, the problems with that as well with MAC address registration, right? And want to spin up bunches of machines or have them shipped. I mean, endpoint engineering would really like to contact Dell and say, hey, build us a Berkeley laptop and ship it to this person in this department. They never touch it. It just gets to that person's desk. They open it up. It's ready to go. And we want to support them as much as possible in that. So yeah, we will definitely be trying to provide that IP address management and so on and simplify things. Really, hopefully we'll get to the point where Kelsey manages big things like and unusual things, but end users and departments can handle most of the day-to-day stuff. Yeah.
Talked about ISP and working with them on this particular thing, but on the user side of it, we're worried about the NetReg side of it. Mm-hmm. So they're going to be working with you at the same time to make sure, because right now the register is subnet and they want you to list every IP address that goes into this thing, and it sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, so yeah, we are definitely, Saskia, who works on NetReg and is the developer for NetReg, is sitting just back there. So yes, we're working with them in terms of simplifying all of that as well. They have their own ideas about what they want to do, but for example, we're actually tying in, so in Infobox, which we're implementing, it will actually have database fields that actually reference objects in NetReg. So NetReg and our IP address management system will be closely tied together, and we'll cross-check each other. So that, again, we hope to make that all of that much simpler for people to manage. Yep.
Kind of going along the same lines of NetReg and network information, any time in the future, would there be the possibility for, I guess, authorized people, maybe based on roles in NetReg, being able to see where a physical network connection is terminating, if they're kind of security contact for that subnet of actually hitting, if a device that doesn't have some management agent on plugs into a port that needs to be found, that could be facilitated in a easier manner than today?
Yeah, so right now we have things like the RPage tool, which some people have access to, which allows you to see what MAC addresses were on what switch ports and so on, and what subnets on the network. We're hoping to, with the new, and again, this will be stuff that happens gradually over time as we build it out. With the new IP address management system, we hope to be able to record things like switchboard and so on, and then we're going to be starting, one thing that I didn't talk about here is we're replacing, so the existing shopping cart for data network services is all being replaced starting in about June. We're going to start moving to Telcat, the same system that is used now for voice systems. So we're going to be replacing that, but part of that system is also the system that keeps track of every single cable on campus and what subnet it's in and so on and so forth. So we're going to be replacing that system and hopefully tying it much more closely with the IP addressing system. So when a host plugs in and gets an IP address on DHCP, that MAC address is registered to a port on a switch, which we know what cable that is, what room that cable runs to. So yeah, there will be eventually, hopefully, a place where you can go and say, okay, who actually was that and where were they actually sitting, which has its own interesting privacy concerns. But from an operational perspective, it's really great, right? If you do have to troubleshoot an issue, that we'll actually be able to tell you, yeah, this is where that person was connected physically on the network. Which, I mean, the folks in CSS have this problem where they get security notices for all these subnets that they now run, and then they're like, we don't have any idea where that person is. And then they spend like hours running around trying to find it. And so really, yeah, we're very aware of that, and that's a problem we definitely want to solve, which probably impacts some other departments as well. I think right now we're still really, for many of these things, we're at the stage where we have these ideas and we've been listening to you guys about these problems, and I'm hearing things that I've already heard a lot of times before, hey, we'd like to do this, and it tells me at least I think we're on the right track. We're still at the point really though where we're building the foundational bits that will allow us to enable all of these things, and then the next layer on top of that is going to be building out the actual fun bits for you guys to actually go and use, right? But we have to get in place a lot of that underlying architecture that will actually enable it in a reasonable way. Because, I mean, right now, sure, we could track down any IP address on campus and tell you what room it's in, but it would take about 20 minutes for one of the network engineers to do it, right? So sure, we could provide a service that did it. It would be very manual, right? So we need to build this out in a way that is reproducible across campus for all of our user base. So that's why it'll take us some time to get there. Unless somebody wants to send us a couple $million more, in which case I can make it happen like next week. Like any problem.
How about maybe with tech or two that you could just give them access to doing that for us?
We can definitely talk about providing access to some of our tools that exist today, and we do that for some folks in CSSIT. Some of them are kind of hokey and not great, but if you have people that are looking up things and so on, we can actually talk about that. Yeah.
That would be great too.
we haven't built them yet, sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
This is a general question, bandwidth to off-campus buildings. Any plans around that evolving?
Yeah, so right now our default is 100 megabit per second connection to an off-campus building. which is actually pretty decent, comparatively speaking. When we look across most of the off-campus buildings, they do a lot. They don't really utilize that fully. Buildings that have PBX infrastructure or a lot of users or are running a 56 microphone array to record the sound of hummingbirds' wings get 1 gig connections. So yeah, that's our standard for today. Theoretically, we could do 10 gig to a building, but that's a cost-benefit trade-off for us, right? We don't get any extra money for that. And so that's a cost that we bear. So we're pretty careful about how we spend that money. As I said, that's one area of our budget that is increasing and we don't have control over. And those sorts of things scare me because I want to actually expand that 4% we spend on the actual stuff that gives people connections on campus.
Are there plans to make the phones actually VoIP instead of just standard telephone stuff?
Always. Are there any that will hit? So we're about 3 years out from the point where our existing phone infrastructure would come up for a point where we look at what do we refresh this with. And at that point, we'll see where we are. Again, the quality of the cabling in some parts of campus, I mean, you can run digital voice over, from a data network perspective, what amounts to a piece of chicken wire. But it doesn't work for data networking, right? So there's a lot of issues there. The other thing that we've run into in the past is life safety issues. All of the phones on campus PBX are set up to run for 2 hours if we lose power. That's because they're line powered over their lines, which comes out of a central point in the building. If we move to doing voice over IP, that means we have to provide 2 hours of backup power to every network switch on campus. We could do that, but again, you'd have to send $2 million every year. Right. So that's one of those things where it's like there's expenses and trade-offs in doing that. And that's the reason why we didn't go with a VoIP design to begin with. And that would be something that we have to talk about and handle in some way. It may be okay. Maybe we say most phones don't stay up that long, but some do, and we have some red phones around the place that are, this is an emergency phone that will work when there's a lot of things like that. But you get into some very complicated things because, I mean, you're dealing with students' lives, and that's really sad. There's one thing that we, on the phone side of things, a lot of our design goes into when the student is lying, and this has happened, bleeding out on the floor in a chemistry lab, you want to pick up the phone and get somebody there right then. The other thing with VoIP is it provides an ability for extensions, which is a problem for that, right? You move to somewhere else and you call 911 and they go halfway across campus to where they think you are. That's going to be a problem, right? So there's a lot of issues to deal with voice over IP. They're all solvable, but they're, you know, like any problem, you need the resources to solve it, and some of those are money and some of them are time.
This is not my area of expertise, but I was going to ask you if you could comment on support for Apple networking protocols. I'm not sure if it's modular gateways or something.
You mean the things that are made for using at home? Yeah. So, and Apple themselves have sort of started to try and make that. So Bonjour is a protocol that uses something called multicast DNS. Basically, it broadcasts, hey, here's my name. And if you go back about 15 years, there were a bunch of protocols that did them. One of them was Apple Talk. And every network engineer in the world cheered the last when they turned off no Apple Talk routing on their routers and walked away from it, right? And then Apple came along with this protocol that basically does the same thing as what Apple Talk did. It broadcasts out over just a local subnet, hey, here I am. So if you're on that subnet, it works. Well, every access point in every building lands you on a separate subnet for your wire ports, for example. So if I wire up an Apple TV here, you won't see it immediately off of that access point, right? It doesn't matter. So there's a lot of problems like that with that. We have met with folks from campus departments, and ETS, for example, has some interest in this area. And we've actually met with Apple and network vendors. Apple were kind of like, hey, we're just here to encourage people to use our stuff. Cisco were like, yeah, we'll provide you all this hacky stuff that will make it work. To which I said to them, great, you're reinventing all the problems we had with Apple Talk and IPX way, way, way back when. Thanks for that. Really right now, from what we've heard, is there's some people who would like to use this stuff, but we haven't heard it to the level that makes us go, oh my goodness, we have to solve this problem right now. Do we have some ideas? Are we doing a little bit of testing around the place with things and keeping our eye on technology that would allow us to support these things? Yeah, absolutely. Last time I talked to ETS, they told me that, oh my goodness, the maintenance concerns we'd have for an Apple TV that can be accessed by anybody wandering by on Wi-Fi are just horrendous. We don't really want to do that just yet. They're doing some small control things themselves with that sort of thing, but really it's an issue it's an issue we know we're going to have to address. People want to be able to do that, right, where they walk into a lecture hall, instead of plugging in their cable and doing all that stuff, they just pop in, bang, and they're up on the projector. Everybody wants that, and people want classroom technologies where the students can have interaction on their own devices, potentially even, where they can interact with the lecturer. So we know it's something we're going to have to solve. The technologies in that area are all right now really, really bad, and there's a lot of problems with solving them. We'll get there. But I think we're a few years out. It's something we're keeping an eye on, though. And if anyone has a specific use case and thing that you think we should be looking at and working with you on, again, feel free to let us know about it, and we'll see what we can do. Because we're always interested in doing some sort of a trial and seeing how it works out as well.
So just to kind of follow up on that same note about products, wireless projectors and things that are going to be accessed to network through that, are we able to actually get a static IP over the wireless for that particular device? That way we don't have to worry about, hey, the IP changed again. Hey, the IP changed again. 24 hours. Not
yet, no. That would be something that would be that's something that we can think about doing and look at. That's a useful idea, to be able to provide devices. Fixed IP addresses on Wi-Fi is something that we could think about, because that would solve some of the problems, right? Even if you can't use the full multicast DNS, Bonjour, whatever it is. If you know the IP address of the thing you want to connect to and can put it on a sticker somewhere, then that may be a halfway thing, right? So that's something we could think about, yeah. We could definitely talk about that.
The reason I asked is because I was asked to ask that question.
That's fine.
It's a long, complicated story, basically. That is probably going to be happening more percent.
Okay.
And so that's the reason I'm asking.
Okay. Yeah, shoot me an email.
I don't want it to, but it's going to.
Yeah, shoot me an email and we'll talk about it. I can't guarantee anything, but it's definitely something we'll look at for you and see what we can do to help you out. We've done, we have some things that are custom on we're taking away air bearers. We have some custom things we did for air bearers too, for example, for ticket scanners and so on, for cal performances and so on. So we can do custom things if we need to. We want to be flexible and support people. We just have to make sure that we do it in a reasonable way so it is actually supportable.
Yes.
Right. Anything else? I actually have to go anyways because I have a meeting with a bunch of people to talk about a data center.
Thank you very much, Isaac, for coming here and answering all of our questions. I'm sorry to say that I got the recording started late, so just a tiny bit of the meeting is not recorded, but the rest of it will be up on the BlueJeans server sometime today, and I'll shoot you a Micronet announcement, let you know that. I'll remind you one more time that next month we're going to be talking about Groovy and Grails, coding tools that are used in the campus identity management system. And the month after that, the student information systems folks will be here to talk to us. And please write to me and let me know if you have questions for the student information systems folks. See you next time.